We are going to start with Zak Stein. Welcome, Zak, and thank you for joining us in this Global Bildung Day with the theme Education, AI, and the Worldviews of Tomorrow.
Um, yeah, so I haven't listened to what has been said before in the space, so I'm kind of speaking into a void here. And so I'm just going to kind of lay a little bit of groundwork so that what I say can be received. So, AI. I'll speak a little bit about AI, and then I'll speak a little bit about what I know about the education of those people who are most responsible for building AI as we know it. And then I'll talk about what that means for the future. So it's interesting that AI became very topical recently with the release of ChatGPT. And I think that's primarily because this was the first time that AI was talking to us. Before that, AI had been fundamentally manipulating our attention through the curation of our social media and news feeds. So the first wave of AI, if you will, it's probably actually the second or third wave, but let's call it the first wave, is curation, social media, micro-targeting, psychometric profiles that run across all your emails and all your web behavior and all of that stuff, and then decide the next thing that you're going to look at. That's AI. Has been machine learning. But it wasn't talking to us. And so, and it's just worth noting, like, we failed with that version of AI. And it really wasn't, hard to see how devastating it was already becoming. So there's that. It's also worth mentioning that, like, self-driving cars, a whole bunch of the sensor networks that populate major urban centers, supply chain efficiency optimization, all of these things are machine learning, all of these things are AI. So it's important when we talk about AI not to just focus on ChatGPT, and specifically ChatGPT, which was designed to kind of model, 2001: A Space Odyssey, like a machine that speaks to us as if it's a human. That's one very, very, very narrow, specific, consumer-oriented, public-facing, attention-capturing use of AI. It's not the main event in AI. It's mostly distracting. BlackRock, very large financial trading house. How large? We don't know. It has a supercomputer on its own GPU cluster, Aladdin, which is an AI that operates on finance market trading speculation. That's been running for some time. That's AI. We don't know the amount of competitive market advantage that Aladdin has given BlackRock, so we don't know how to predict its future share of the total assets of the planet Earth. It's already one of the largest real estate owners in the world. So that's AI. Tesla is the largest integrated sensor network of robots in the world. All of the cameras on all of the Tesla, all of the GPS locationing, all of the conversations that happen in Teslas, all of that stuff is housed in giant GPU clusters and integrated through AI. If we use AI as I'm defining it. So just saying that when we say AI, it's like it's a very, 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 very large category. And so that means that the risks that populate from AI are like very, very large risks. And so Palantir, right, this is a software company that does a lot of work in integrating large language models and AI into battlefield operations. One of the companies responsible for the Ukraine war being competitive, not having Russia just destroy the Ukraine. So yeah, it's AI. And China's Sesame credit system runs on a very complex algorithm backend, similar to the one that we have plugged into our social media networks, which generate a social credit score that determines a tremendous amount of the activity that can be done. So the wave of AI that's caught our attention, and especially the attention of educators, is what's been called generative AI. And this is the AI that is starting to talk to us. It's the AI that is starting to do things that look like cultural production, and that look like relationship, meaning like human-to-human relationship creation. And so in one sense, this is perhaps the most dangerous form of AI from the perspective of educators and psychologists and people who worry about culture. So there's more. But if we just focus on this, we're going to focus on this a little bit. It's important to get that this wave of generative AI is worth worrying about. So I said all of that stuff about AI to say, like, there's a ton of stuff to keep your eye on. When it begins to speak to us, it crosses a certain threshold, and that's why it's arrested our attention, because it begins to start to replace certain functions that we thought were irreplaceable in the nature of society. It's like we always kind of understood that, like, having a guy do a bunch of math on paper to try to optimize, like, the traveling salesman problem or whatever for a supply chain, like, obviously the dude's like, we could get a machine to do that better than a dude, right? But when it came to, like, okay, sit down on the couch and tell me your problems and I'll solve your neurosis, it seems like that's probably something we need a human to do. Similar with, like, education and other things. So I've spoken elsewhere quite a lot about my fears surrounding artificial intelligence tutoring systems. I'm not going to recapitulate those here. But the main risk there is that you create a tutoring system that's way too good, that makes human relationship obsolete. Right? That's important. So it's one thing to make like weird management positions in supply chain optimization obsolete, not have to have a computer be a machine. Not have to have a human be a computer. So that's cool. Let's get that guy out of that job. It's another thing to think about replacing the foundation of intergenerational transmission and love and reproduction, which is relationship. So the question of what types of social roles cannot be replaced, not just from the perspective of, like, oh, we've lost a job, but from the perspective of there are things that humans can't not do if we want to remain human. Some of those things are like reproducing the species biologically, and I would argue facilitating intergenerational transmission. So the risk with a comprehensive tutoring system is that it fundamentally disrupts intergenerational transmission, very fundamentally, so that we have a generation that's for the first time in history raised by machines and not raised by people. It's like a catastrophe, and kind of an invisible, weird catastrophe, which is already a little bit occurring in slow motion, given screen addiction and the first wave of AI, which, again, the first wave of AI was already curating our experience and basically telling us what to think. It just wasn't talking to us. It was finding stuff it wanted to say to us that someone else had said and putting in front of us. So there's this grave risk, and there are many risks associated with the generative AI and the possibility of it coupling to tutoring, and then the tutoring expanding to socialization more broadly. So we begin with tutoring system and personal assistance. And then the question is, well, if this thing's so good at doing that, why can't it be a parent? Why not have AI parenting systems? Broadly comprehensive AI socialization systems, which kind of remove the human from the loop of intergenerational transmission. They always cause problems anyway. All these mothers and teachers interfering with the state, optimally maximizing productivity of the citizens by not being perfectly productive educators and parents. We could imagine an optimal AI socialization system. seems inevitable. And here now I'm getting to my point, and preferable if you are a transhumanist, singularitarian, perhaps simulation believer, right? So who's making these systems? Why is the world now overrun? Literally, if you think of all those things I've described, why is it overrun with machine intelligence and actually underwhelmed by biological human intelligence, right? So that is this broader point, which is that all periods in history are kind of run by ruling classes. You could argue. I mean, obviously, there's other readings of history, but let's take this one on. Kind of ruling classes. They have particular ideologies that motivate behavior. And the question of what are the ideologies that dominate the classes that are kind of like, the techno-feudalists that are emerging in the context of the transference from capitalism being dominated by, let's say, printing presses to being dominated by the digital. It's a major transformation occurring. And as that's occurring, there's a new group that are stepping in to create the basic social architectures. And these architectures now involve machine intelligence. We're looking at a small class of technologists, a small, relatively small group of technologists. And the question is, what do they believe is the nature of reality? What do they believe is the nature of human relationship and value? And if you start to look into that, and again, this is a subclass of a broader class, which is just people who have a tremendous amount of wealth. There's a whole subspecies of research into that. And then within that, there's a subspecies of these technologists, right? You're already distorted in your perception by asymmetric wealth accumulation. And then when you couple that to a kind of initiation in the mathematics of world creation, absent deep embodied certain forms of experience, you get the emergence of a kind of interesting apocalyptic transhumanism, which is called singularitarianism, which you all know because it's become a popular view of transhumanists, which is the idea that we're approaching a point of technological revolution in which things that we know of as like politics and culture and intelligence and free will and a lot of the things that we think of as human and associate with humanism will end. Perhaps even biological life, to be replaced by the digital and the silicon. And the transhumanist view is one in which that is the inevitable evolution of planetary existence. That it's our job to be here to create the silicon self-replicating species that will replace us, right? So we upload our consciousness, right? Or create ways to assure physical immortality that involve relationship with that. And so as I'm saying this, most people from most cultures throughout history would think that's a very weird worldview. Like they were like, that's odd. Like even here in this room, it's like, come on, people don't think that. But in fact, I'm here to tell you that people do think that, and they are very powerful people. And so I was interested to hear Lean speak about the indigenous wisdom that sounded like convened the group. And so there's this question of like the intense difference in asymmetry, and I think insanity that characterizes our current worldview, let's say contrasted with wisdom traditions going back to the ancient sea, specifically these indigenous ones. And so what I'm kind of putting to the table before you is this kind of like it's a query. It's a query to educators, and it's a question of Bildung. It's about what occurs when the ruling classes and the most powerful creators and technologists are divorced from tradition of Bildung and actually initiated in some type of technocracy, right? Some initiation of mathematics and silicon and abstraction and simulation and video game. So the urgency of both figuring out how to initiate Bildung in adult populations, in populations of technologists and policymakers who have the ability to constrain and bind the exponential technology that's being created, and then assuring that the next generation of programmers, specifically programmers, not the next generation of like reflective humanist educators, like they're all set. The next generation of people who will build these technologies because they can do it, that they have no choice, that they are Bildunged. I don't know what the right way to say that is, but that there's that there's enough of a broad shift in education and what's available, and I think a broader shift in the worldview of the culture. So the intensification of the singularitarian kind of transhumanist simulation view, I'm not going to get into that one, that's just a microcosm of what's occurring in the broader culture, where Grimes, right, Elon Musk's partner, released that song "I Want to Be Software." I Want to Be Software, the name of the song, very interesting song, where advertisement campaigns where people's phones kind of merge with them and their eyeballs become like the lens of the camera, which is it's an aspirational cyborgian transhumanism, which is suffusing the culture and affecting the next generation, and that needs to be stopped. It's a confusion, and again, it's not like humans have long run by worldviews that we in retrospect like, that's crazy that the ruling classes thought that and they did that. Look what they did to people thinking that, right? Look what they did to the people thinking that crazy view about the world, right? And so like, here we are, right, in a situation where the people who are subject to these technologies believe in a view of the world very different from the people who are subjugating them. Fundamentally different. The vast majority of the world believe in a religion that's not like a singularitarian simulation AI religion. That's like Hinduism or Buddhism or Christianity or Judaism or a religion. The field of value is real. Something like God exists. Your actions have moral consequence. You're not being tricked by a simulation, and you're not preparing to upload your consciousness into silicon. You're preparing to die the way humans have always died. So that asymmetry of a small number of people believing something that's by many people's standards insane, putting themselves into a position to dominate over the people who are by other standards sane, is a tricky situation. So I'm just kind of bringing that to light. And as educators, is in part our responsibility, consequence, also of our failures to reach that class of actors who segregated computer science into little, wizard towers that we couldn't find a way into, and then got the support of the state, the military, and other things in a way that the humanists were never able to acquire, at least not for a long time. So, yeah,